This is how I met John, because it is so bizarre. I, for a period of 2 or 3 years, ran a second organization, like I didn't have enough to do already, called Chicago Native Flutes, for people who were interested in playing the Native American flute. And we met on the first Saturday every month at, or was it the third Saturday? I don't remember. Once a month at the Wilmette Library. And we usually had a minimum of 5 people and upwards as many as 30. And I always felt a little kind of lagging behind in some way, because I just didn't have time to do what needed to be done with that organization after I had done what needed to be done with this one. Most of my energy went to this one. So after 2 or 3 years, it kind of disbanded. But I think one of the reasons that I had that organization was to meet John, because I was going to look up the date. Was anybody here to see Judy Goodman about 3 years ago? There's some people that remember her. She was a psychic from Columbus, Georgia, who had a near-death experience. And she did private sessions for us, and I had a session with her. And at that session, she told me, she said, most people, when they die, they maintain their persona from their most recent lifetime on the other side. And she said, that's not true for you, looking at me. She said, when you die, you go immediately to the place where you always go in between lives. She said, you wear these long white robes, and she said you have long blonde hair and you wear it up, and most of the time, not all the time. And she said you work with children, and you're in this very, very beautiful place. She said there's this enormous lake. She said it's so peaceful and gorgeous, and there's a great big tree. And so I thought, I was just kind of, okay, that's what you're doing, fine. I didn't have anything attached to it, but sounds fine. So 1 week later, I went to my Native Flutes meeting, and we had arranged to have the auditorium that week, which is always special, so I expected quite a few people. When I got there, there was one man sitting there, nobody else. And I thought, well, I'll just sit down and wait for people to come. Well, I sat down a couple of rows behind him, and after a minute he turned around, he said, oh, hi. He said, I came for the first time last month, and I was really fascinated by something you said, so I'm glad to have a chance to talk to you. So we started talking, and he started telling me his story, and he'll tell you his story. And then down the pike in his story, should I tell him? Down the pike in his story, he's working with Brian Weiss, who's doing a past life regression, and Brian puts him way down under, and he says, I'm in this place, and I'm wearing long white robes, and there's this beautiful, beautiful lake, and there's this big tree, and I'm going, we don't know why, but we were supposed to meet. So that's how I met John, and we had a kind of, we agreed that there was something here, and we met a couple of times for coffee. Nothing seemed to be doing, and he'll tell you all about his part of all of this. But then a few months ago, we had kind of a strange synchronistic thing that caused me to call him again, and we met again, and this business of IC was brewing, and I was telling him about it, and then I realized he was supposed to be our first speaker, our transitional speaker from the traditional near-death experience to people who've had other experiences and have had their transformation occur because of another experience. And this is his story. So please give a warm welcome to John Terrell.
Well, I'm glad to see everybody that has come, and we all are journeying together, and we're all here at the time we're designated to be, wherever we are supposed to be. And Diane took a little bit of my introduction there, which was to talk about how we connected, which was really kind of a bizarre series of things that just led us to this at this point. But I was honored when Diane and I were having coffee, and she was sharing her vision of some of the changes that could occur with IAMS. And I've never really gotten up and spoken to other people other than to plan commissions and to city council members and things like that. That's what I do. So this is going to be very different for me. I have done some workshops and facilitated some things like that, but nothing quite like this. And in particular when it's very personal, because part of what Diane and I talked about was to talk about my journey, because that's a part of what this is all about. But I was really honored and humbled quite when Diane said it. I was not anticipating anything like that when she said, you know, I just got it, you're supposed to be the speaker. And I looked at her and went, whoa, I don't do that. That's not me. But with much gratitude, I accepted, because I knew it was right. I could feel it. I didn't know for a particular reason why, but I felt it was the right thing to do at that moment. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start this maybe a little different than what is typically done. We've got a crystal ball here, and the reason is Diane did the flute in the earlier session. We're going to do the crystal ball to kind of set the vibration in the room and kind of clear and to bring the energy to a level that I think will be quite extraordinary. If anybody has not participated in anything with a crystal ball or toning, it's a very healing and penetrating vibration, and it really opens you up. And what I would ask is that you have an open mind and that you have an open heart, because that's where the sound will go. Allow the sound to come in through your crown and into your heart, and then let it fill the room with that unconditional love that will come through you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to figuratively form a circle. I hate, giving speeches like classroom, because we are all the same. We are all the same individuals in different bodies, effectively. And we're not better or worse or more knowledgeable than anybody sitting next to you or me standing up here. So what I want to do figuratively is when we do the crystal ball, is in your mind's eye, I want you to imagine that we are in one large circle and we are holding hands. And if you have somebody that's next to you, put your left hand up to receive the energy and your right hand down to send the energy. And send that out around the circle as we go clockwise. And as I said, as we get into this, do it in a way that is open and that you know that whoever's sitting next to you is the soul that's very close to you, and that is not better or more worthy than you, but nothing but the same. So why don't you close your eyes, kind of settle in, and we'll spend a moment. I will be toning as well, so you might hear some different sounds going on, which will, and sometimes the sound will train, which means the bowl and the voice will connect, and it will send a whole new vibration out there. So go into your space, quiet space, breathe quietly for two or three breaths, and then just allow. Slowly take some deep breaths and come out and open your eyes when you're ready. You'll feel that energy for days. It will react in very different ways, but allow it to be something that really resonates. And as Diane was talking earlier, it reminded me, sound and vibration is just incredible. When you look at this physical body in the universe, effectively 90% is open space or water. And the atoms that are around, effectively, when vibration like sound goes through, it moves those. That's why it can be a very important healing energy. So when you take that in and you kind of look at this physical body, look at the micro and macro. The universe and our bodies are identical. Go beyond our bodies to the micro, and you see the same thing occurring. So, you know, there's more to, and I think there were some people were talking about, we're much more than just this shell. And what is behind that is what I think is the awakening for all of us to understand that is really important. When Diane asked me to give this talk, I wasn't sure where to begin. She said, "Tell your story." I said, "Well, okay." We talked before about some of it, and I told her what had happened with Dr. Brian Weiss's book, Many Lives, where that was a part of my awakening. In reality, as I thought through it, really that was only a very small part of it. It was just kind of a catalyst. It was kind of the opening door, I think, for some things. And when the awakening for me occurred, it was in the end of 1993, early 94. But before I go to that, I'll give a little back history that I think will be helpful. It was for me because I realized that after going back through my history, there were things that occurred before that I hadn't realized. and I was sharing at breakfast a little bit about some of those things. And one of the things I didn't share, which came to me when I was meditating this morning at 4:30 in bed and kind of going through my thoughts, and I went back effectively 35 years and realized that I had a near-death experience, but it wasn't a out-of-body experience, it was a real near-death situation. And so I thought that would be added on. I didn't really prepare for that, but I thought it would be kind of interesting. What occurred was I had a broken heart, and it was an incredible broken heart that occurred. It was just very tragic from my perspective. And I was, I guess I was probably about 19 or 20 years old. I was in college and about failing because of the situation. And I decided to take off a quarter, and I said, I'm going to California. That's it. My aunt and uncle lived there, so I'm going out there. They said they'll keep me for as long as I need, so I went out there and I spent a month with them. And as I was out there during that period, one of the things that occurred is I was going up and down the coast, because they lived in San Fernando Valley out of LA, is I would spend a lot of time stopping at places and trying to see if I could figure anything out. Some of those were bars, some of those were, all different types of things. But some of those were in nature. And one of the times that I was there was in a Redondo Beach area, and there were these cliffs that I drove up to, and they're about 300-foot cliffs, and I thought, well, geez, this looks nice. I think I'm going to walk down them. I had my camera on, and so I proceeded to walk along the edge of the cliff and realized that it wasn't a stone cliff, but it was a dirt cliff. And it was one of those where as soon as I took a couple of steps, I knew I was in trouble. I was up about 270 feet before I knew it, and the earth came out from underneath me, and I was standing on about, not even the size of this, plateau with my back against the wall. And I stood there and I didn't know what to do. And I knew that as I looked out to people, helicopter was going by and people in the distance, I must have looked about that big. And I knew I wasn't going anywhere. And at that point I reached out to wherever I could, if it was God, if it was, I don't know, I just don't even remember what I said. But I knew I was in trouble. And it was a serious position I had put myself in. And I realized the only way I was going to get out after about 20 minutes of standing there was that I had to dig in. So I put my arm from there to there, and I dug backwards like this. And I climbed back up that hill, or not hill, it was actually a cliff, so it was pretty straight up. And when I got to about where my shoulder was above the cliff, threw my camera over the top. And I tried to ease one shoulder over and eventually got to where I could swing a leg over. And I laid at the top of that cliff, peering out at everything, and I realized that I don't know what happened, but I'm alive. But I shouldn't be. So what happened after the next was kind of interesting, because I kept going back to that location, but down at the base of the ocean where the rocks were. And I went there for probably about a week. I would go, I remember when I was young, but I was able to get a quart of beer, Schlitz. I remember that. Just go get a quart of Schlitz and some cheese and some bread, and I would go sit by that rock, these large rocks that were out in the ocean, and just watch the ocean come in. And at that time, I never knew anything about meditation or anything like that, so I wasn't meditating. I was just in that space. By the end of that week, I realized that something had changed. And I had this wonderful, wonderful glow that filled my entire body right here. And the heartache was gone. And it was a really serious situation. But it was gone. And it was a wonderful experience. And I went back to college and I went, God, I got to tell you what happened. And I shared it with everybody, and it was really kind of an interesting discussion with people. And I met this really interesting woman. And what ended up happening was She broke my heart. The glow went away. I said, something's not right here. It went away. It was gone. I mean, this was a serious glow. I mean, I could feel light coming out of my chest. And about 2 months later, I didn't realize this part, but I met my wife to be. We met in July. We were engaged in August and married in December, 37 years ago. At that time, I didn't know it. And I didn't know it until about 30 years ago. I had met my soulmate. But I didn't realize until I went through what I went through that I had met her. And I wish she was here. But now fast forward, 1993, end of 1993, and I was sharing this at breakfast, that I realized after reviewing things, there were signs that I was awakening at that point. I just didn't know what they were. The first was, I think it was Schumacher-Levy comet, sometime in, I think it was in, I know that it was cold because I was up in Maine. I had taken a project up in Maine and I was traveling up there, and I'll share that in a second. But I saw the comet. And for most people that realize that that comet was also the comet that crashed into Jupiter a year later. The first time for any conscious being to see something outside of our own planet actually occur. So it was a really kind of telling kind of moment. The other thing that occurred, and I giving a little context, I had been working up in Maine, and I was a development consultant, and I had taken a sole source job up there up in the mountains of Maine on a residential development that was across from Sunday River on another mountain overlooking Sunday River, which was a large ski resort. And I was going up there probably 3 to 4 times a week, leaving every Sunday and coming back on Thursdays. And if it was winter or it was nice out there in the spring, the family would come up for the weekend. But that's how we lived for 2.5 years. And at that time, my daughters were 4 and 5, or 3 and 4. And so one Sunday in May, it was in November, I left at 7:30 after dinner. And I had realized that I had stopped playing the radio for about 6 months on my trip up there. And I would drive, and I always liked driving long distance because, is there Kleenex around here? I liked driving up because I go into almost a meditative state when I drive in those long states. Oh, thank you. Sorry about that. And this time was very significant because I was living in the Boston area up in Swampscott, the North Shore, and I would drive up, across over New Hampshire, the tip of New Hampshire, and then I would take a kind of a left going into the middle of Maine, up into Bethel and Newry, Maine. It was about a 3.5-hour drive from where we lived. But by the time I got to Maine, which was pretty quick, it was only probably about a half hour or so, it got so dark. There was no lights. Very rarely did you see a car or a truck, especially on a Sunday. So I'm driving up there in the pitch black. It was just incredible. And I'm in this meditative state, no radio, for 3 hours. And I get close to the resort, and as I'm looking, there was no moon out, so there was no silhouettes on any mountains anywhere as I was driving up. And as you drive in a car, you can only vision screens here. I was getting close to the mountain, and all of a sudden I could see the silhouettes of the mountain, and I was going, this is strange. and it looked like lights going up, and it was like Klieg lights, like there was some event or something going on. So I just thought that's what was happening, or if we have a big event coming up that week. Anyways, I proceeded to drive up into the valley and then go up our mountain, and I realized that those Klieg lights were around ours, so it couldn't be Sunday River, something else was going on. And as I drove around and got to where I was staying, which was on a kind of like on a overlook cliff area that overlooks Sunday River over the valley, I got out of the car and I did a 360, and I realized that all the way around me were these lights. And they were the white lights, and what it was the northern lights, and they literally were crossing above me. That was the most bizarre thing I'd ever seen. Just pulsating like this, with a little bit of pink and a little bit of blue-green or whatever. It was just bizarre. And I just took it off as an experience, and that was it. So I finished my week there, and as I was driving home, and as I was telling everybody at breakfast, I realized that was it. I was going home. I wasn't coming back. And I stopped the car halfway and at a truck stop, and I called Darla and I said, that's it, it's over, I'm coming home. But I didn't know why. I just knew that I needed to get out of there, or something was going on, and that's when it all shifted. And that was in, as I said, in November. I think somebody gave me a book, Many Lives, Many Masters, at that point. I read the book, and I'm not a reader. I read a book a year, a book of 2 years. I'm an architect, I'm a developer. I don't think in intellectual terms that way. I just don't need the book. I think that's at least what I was thinking. So I read the book, and I went to, I just was really into it. It was really interesting. It was opening my eyes, and some other things were starting to happen. And that was in November, December. And in January, somebody gave me another book, Care of the Soul by Thomas More. I just drove through it. It just was incredible, which is not an easy book to go through, but boy, I just ate it up. It was incredible. And at that time, I knew something had to happen. And fortunately, in '71, my wife and I both took TM, so I knew a little bit about meditation, and I went into meditation, and I went into deep meditation. I started a deep inner journey alone, just by myself, other than what I had to read and my meditations. I was meditating 2 to 4 times a day. I was meditating 20 minutes to 2 hours. And I was purging everything. I was downloading everything. Things were coming in left and right. I couldn't even put them where they needed to be put. By February, I was reading another book. It was called Book of Angels by Sophie Burnham. And by March, I was reading another book, Celestine Prophecy. So I'm going, whoa, what's all happening here? And as I'm going through these meditations, a number of things started to happen. And I remember one of them specifically because it was such a turning point. And what it was I was walking down the path that I had been walking down many times in these meditations and that. And I was carrying a backpack. In that backpack, I continued to pick things up and put them in my backpack, just like this. Kept carrying them, and it was getting heavier, and it was getting heavier, and it was imagining bricks being put into my backpack. But during this meditation, something changed. I took the backpack off, and I put it on the path. And I said, that's it. I don't want it. I walked down the path a couple of times, and I kept doing this. But there was no backpack. It was all the stuff that I was taking on was no longer staying. The backpack was gone. And I realized something had changed as it related to that. And I also realized as a part of what I was going through is the purging was going through what I call, how I've characterized it and visualized it and seen it, is becoming naked and vulnerable in front of self with a big S, God. That's what was happening. I was releasing everything I had learned, I was releasing everything that I was taught. I was releasing everything from anything I learned in any of my religious upbringing as a Lutheran. I was letting it all go. Not necessarily to go away forever, but I was purging everything. I was allowing me to be naked and vulnerable in front of myself. Everything that I could think of was being put right in front of me again. I had a period of releasing fears of damnation, whatever it might be, that I'm releasing my religion. Well, I'm releasing it. That's okay. I was okay with it. And then another meditation as I was going along, I actually sat down in the path and defied God, at least what I could identify as God. And I said, I'm not going anywhere anymore. And I'm seeing I'm seeing a crossroads right in front of me, and I'm saying, I'm not going anywhere unless I get answers and some guidance. And it was like a shot. At that moment, it was like being directly connected to the source. You can call it whatever you want, call it God, call it your source of energy, or whatever. It was directly connected. And what happened was, all fear was released. Every bit of fear. I didn't care about paying bills. I didn't care about whatever it was. I was releasing everything, and all the fear was gone. And the following week, which was really interesting for me, there was confirmation. I was starting to get confirmation of things that I was getting in meditations. And one of those things was fear. How could I release fear? And when I can be directly connected to Source, why do I have fear? Well, a friend of mine that I had met had a doctor friend who was just retiring, and he was going through some stuff, and we all wanted to get together and talk, so we all got together and talked. And we were sharing a lot of different things. He was doing some Course in Miracle things and all of those, and so we just talked and talked and talked. And I shared with him that I had this, a week ago, this issue of no fear. And he looked at me and he said, John, that's your ego speaking. And he said, you know what? You got to have a fear. What is it? And he did this about 5 or 6 times. He kept coming right back at me and he says, John, what's your fear? And I kept saying, I'm telling you, I don't have it. Based on what happened to me, it was real. I don't have it. Yeah, I may pay, have to pay bills and so on. And I got a fear for that I can't do it or whatever. But it goes away right away. I don't carry it anymore. And we got in the car, and I was sitting in the back seat in the middle, and they were both sitting in the front seat. And we were driving along, and Stephen, was his name, did something that really got me. He actually turned in his seat very quickly, and he got within about 3 inches of my face, and he said, John, what's your greatest fear? It shocked the hell out of me. I looked at him and I went, whoa, what you just did, and let me tell you what my greatest fear that came to me just then. My greatest fear was what I've been going through and what we've been discussing is all a hoax. That all this connection to Source and to all the things that I've been learning and feeling and experiencing is a hoax. That's my greatest fear. But I don't believe that. And I tapped him on his shoulder, and I pointed straight out the window, and we were at a stop sign, and there was a truck within its tailgate. It said, no fear. They both turned, their jaws dropped, and I said, confirmation. And what was interesting is about a week later, he called me and we talked again, but he didn't want to bring any of it up. And so I was just listening to him, we were talking, and I started hearing something in the back of my mind, and I said, after he was about ready to get off, I said, Stephen, remember what I told you about this being my greatest fear was a hoax? You know what came to me? If this is a hoax, who the hell cares? We die and we go on. That's why I have no fear. So it was one of these transitional moments for me, and for Stephen as well. We shared a lot of different things after that. But then I got to March when I was reading the Celestine Prophecy. And my wife had been going to church, and it was a new pastor, and I hadn't been going. She said, I want you to go to church. And I said, fine. So I went. And I'm sitting in the back rows with my wife, and the pastor got up and started giving a sermon. And I realized it was a great sermon. I was kind of getting into it, and all of a sudden I was taken off somewhere else. I was not in the sermon at all. I was actually taken off, and I could hear something, or I felt something, and it was like it was my mother. I didn't hear the voice, I didn't see her, but I know that it was my mother's essence. And she told me things that I needed to do regarding the family. I'm out in Boston, and I'm the oldest of 6, and they're all back here in Chicago. And I had no idea what was going on, but I needed to come back here in some way. And so at that moment, that's when the reality set in. This was real. This was not some awakening of sorts. That it was a real effort that was going on, and I needed to pay attention. And I also realized at that moment that this was not about, actually this was about a knowing that this journey is about the Christ, the Buddha, the Krishna, the Guru, the Source, and the God within each one of us. Because it exists within each one of us. There is that divine spark that is in each one of us. And this is just a shell. And I knew that with all my heart that that's what was going on here. In about April to August, a number of things were going on, and meditations were getting very intense. I was reading accelerated. I was not reading a book a year, a book every 2 years, or a book a month. I was now reading 4 to 6 books at a time. That hasn't stopped. And I was reading everything from energy, natural healing, science, cosmos, Big Bang, all religions, different cultures, spiritual in general. And I don't think there's many of you out here that are any different. Some of those things are going on for you as well. But that was where my appetite was. And I wasn't a reader. But I was just devouring books, and I continued to. And then I started living life in the moment. And I'm going to read a couple of things that really more depict, what it means for me in living in that moment. These are things that are thoughts that have come to me as I've been either meditating or just sitting in space and waiting. I am gifted with this time alone, to contemplate, to originate, to wonder the mystery of it all, to wish upon a star, to hope it all comes true, to carry on, to know the truth, to awaken a little more, to come this far, to not give up, to take it home, to show the way, to stay the course, and to be my truth and wonder no more. We are gifted with the truth and knowing that we are not alone. For me is I started to live those moments, and I had my own business, but I wasn't working, and I didn't say that earlier, but when I came back in November, December, I stopped work. I didn't work for almost a year. And it was not because I didn't want to go to work. It was that I felt something was more important. But I had a family. I had a wife and I had 2 kids, and they were young. But quite frankly, it paled in terms of what I was connected with. And I'm sorry sometimes to say that, but I've even said it to my family. When you get that connected and committed to God, in whatever source or shape you call it, it is your life. That's what you become. And what happened was I started doing things differently. When I would have meetings in Boston, I would set much time between meetings. I would have hours between meetings. And Boston was a great walking city. And at that time, I was reading another book by Thomas More called Re-Enchantment of Everyday Life. And what was interesting about it, I didn't realize what I was doing, but I was reading the book, or I was experiencing things, and then I was reading what I was supposed to do, which was another confirmation. And I was walking through the city and sitting and meditating and finding things that I never saw before. I had an experience that was a quite extraordinary one from my perspective. I had just meditated in what is kind of the center common in Back Bay, and was walking down where there were a lot of statues and stuff, and I was just about to go into the gate of the public garden. And for those of you who have been to Boston, been to the public garden, you'll understand this experience. I walked through the gate, and it was not real. It was, the colors were vibrant. It was in April. The tulips were up. Other colors where it was a combination of brilliant colors, pastels, and this wonderful glow of a white light that just shimmered over the entire public garden. It was, and I don't know if any of you have seen the Celestine Prophecy movie. But there is an end at the Celestine Prophecy movie where they walk into this place, and where they're at the garden at the end there. That's what it was like. It was incredible. I mean, to this day, I know it was real. I know it was not just my perception, it was real. And that has had, and you'll see later, has had an extraordinary effect on some things for me in terms of where it ultimately went. I continued walking and moved to what is called the Boston Common, which is more utilitarian. You have all of the softball things and other things out there. And as I walked out the gate to go across the street to that, I looked across, and here was this this guy. It looked like he was in a lounge chair, and he was sitting there going like this. And I couldn't figure out what it was, and as I got closer and closer, I realized he had a deep-sea fishing rod. And connected to the rod was a kite. He was flying a kite in the middle of the common with this this deep-sea fishing rod. And I had been prepared for a meeting I was going to with a board of, it was the United States Sports Center for the Disabled. And I was going to the board to meet some people that a friend of mine had asked me to come to the meeting. I had no idea what it was about, so I was dressed in my suit, and I was pretty, I was looking pretty nice, and just walked along, and all of a sudden, as I got closer to this guy, I realized that he had multiple disabilities, and he was in a wheelchair. It was a mechanized wheelchair, and he was sitting there flying his kite. And all these people were walking along, and I walked right underneath the rod, and he motions me over and says, "Come here," and he pushed the rod right in front of me, gave me the rod, and he said, couldn't understand him. He just said something. So I took this rod, and here I am, dressed in my suit, and looking, just flying this kite, having a ball. It was just incredible. And people were coming by, and they're looking at me, and they're kind of chuckling and smiling, and I tried to give it back to him. He kept pushing it back to me, and finally I got it back to him. I said, "I got to go to a meeting." He said, "Fine." He motioned me towards, and he said something, and he mumbled it about 4 or 5 times. He couldn't talk really. It was part of his disability was he had a speech impediment that was, he just couldn't talk. And I got within about 2 inches or 3 inches of his mouth, and he whispered in my ear, he said, because you have had a hard day at work. I hadn't done a stitch of work all day except work on my soul. It was an unbelievable statement when he made that. It was like he was an angel. And I kept going back there looking for this guy. I never could find him again. I proceeded to go forward and have my meeting. And the meeting was, as I said, it was the United States Sports Center for the Disabled. I didn't know this, but when I walked in there, the reason they had asked me to come was to become part of their board. what kind of sign is that? Here I am with a disabled guy having a ball flying a kite, and I'm going to be put on a board. And those were the synchronicities of things that were going on in my life in that time. So I knew it was serious. This was real. This was not something that effectively was just coming from my own imagination. But what I also found out was, as much as I was in bliss, my family was in emotional and financial turmoil. My wife and I almost were going through a revolving door. Her out, me in. This was around August of that 94. At that time, we'd been married about 24 years. We were about to lose our house, which we ultimately did. We filed bankruptcy. And I'm just kind of in bliss. The family is deteriorated underneath me. And I have to tell you, I was coming to tell her, my wife, Carla, that I had finally gotten through what I needed to go through in my journey so I could go back out into the reality and earn some money so we could live. She wasn't even willing to hear that because I had already passed that point. Fortunately, it all came together and she stayed, we worked on it. And I went out, the real estate developer I was, and I went and sold suits at Milton's, a men's clothing store. Because I knew I couldn't go back to what I used to do. Because I don't know how I would work in that environment at this point in my life, which was in 94. And what was interesting about it is I was dressing people for their first suit to people for their last suit and in between. And I was having a ball. And I was having conversations with every one of them, and they were spiritual conversations. They were deep conversations. Even the people I worked with, it was just a really incredible. And I knew for me what it was a chance to kind of hone myself a little bit, to go back to the reality of working with people. So that's really what occurred, during that point. And then in September of 94, I was working. We were trying to make a living, getting things going, and I started my journey with like-minded people. Before that, I had not been with other people, meaning I had not gone out, done workshops, done other things. I had been pretty much internal, doing reading and so on and so forth in my meditations. But now I started to meet with people. We set up a meditation group. We met for 3.5 years every Sunday and meditated as a group. It could be 2 people, it could be 20 people. And it was pretty average that we had anywhere from 6 to 8 people. And it was a very energetic meditation. Some of the people that were in those meditations were graduates of Barbara and Brennan, the energy school. Some of them were from Energy Mastery and so on and so forth. These became very energetic efforts, and it was just incredible the stuff that was coming through everybody and what we were sharing with each other in these meditations. They were very experiential group gatherings is the best way to kind of characterize it. I went out and I got my first degree Reiki and then an advanced degree Reiki from John Gray, who was one of the 22 that was trained by Takata. Even though I never used it, I knew it was important for me to understand that and use it for myself and maybe in the future. So I was tapping into things. All of a sudden, sound became important to me. Vibrational therapy became important. I had visions of creating what I call a harmonic healing chapel, right down to the design of what it looks like. And that was easy for me to do because I'm an architect and a developer. But it was in my head and I could see it, and there is a harmonic healing chapel that will occur. It will be part of the collective consciousness. It's just not me. Many people have that. But these things were coming and they were real. I found that what was going on at that point, that I found 2 words became my mantra. Awareness and balance. And in that, I'm going to read something because I think it tells it more than me trying to say it. Is awareness and balance are interesting because if you're aware, you have a choice. You can either be in balance or you can be out of balance. It's a choice. Here it is right here. Awareness and balance. Can we always walk in a state of balance? Only if we have awakened to our awareness. It is through this awareness that we can choose to be in or out of balance. Balance is the center of our being and the ability to walk in stillness through each experience. I so desire silence, the stillness of my breath, the quiet beat of my heart, the emptiness of my mind, the awareness that my being is in balance. So those things started to come fast and furious, and I do live by that. I live by awareness and balance. And I'm out of balance quite a bit, but I'm aware of it. And I think that's the important part of realizing that we are a work in progress. Nobody's got it all, and you just have to continue to work it. I started going to temples, to churches, to ashrams, to other sacred spaces. I went to see Guru Mai, I saw Mother Mira, I saw Amachi, I saw Sai Baba. I went and talked with priests, pastors, rabbis, and had all different types of discussions with people. And I even went at that point where I was I'm sitting in Boston and there was a Harvard Divinity School, and I actually went there and applied because I thought that's what I wanted to do if I was going to make it another career. And I realized very quickly that I didn't want to connect with the old institutional side of where we are headed. And I realized very quickly I needed to step aside of that, so I didn't. But I knew there was something I was supposed to do. I just didn't know what it was. And one of my experiences is when I went to see Guru Mai. I was with a friend, and there's a series of things that you do there if you want to experience all the different things. One of those is you get up very early in the morning sometimes, and you go to these chanting things or meditations or whatever. And one of those was a confirmation for me, one that I had a very difficult issue with as I sat there. But I went to their Guru Gita ceremony. And a Guru Gita ceremony is effectively a celebration of the Guru. And I sat there and I went through it, I listened to it, and I listened to it. I was chanting and trying to read the English version of it, and trying to get a handle on it. Everything I was reading, I'm going, everybody's celebrating either Baba or Guru Mai. And I said, something's not right. I mean, this is just, they're all, and I couldn't figure it out. So in my journal, I wrote down, I just found it last night, I'll share it in a second, but I actually took the book, their Nectar of Chanting, and I took the Guru Gita, and I read the entire thing after I walked out of there, after I couldn't stay much longer than halfway through, I think it was. And I got to a point, and I said, here it is, right here. It's only 2 verses in it. I'm going to read it to you. The Guru is not different from the conscious self. Without doubt, this is the truth. This is the truth. Therefore, wise men should make an effort to seek him. Maya, the creator of the world, the veiled knowledge born of ignorance, resides in the body. He by whose light true knowledge arises is known by the word Guru. What I wrote in my journal was interesting because I walked out, it was very early in the morning, and we got into a horrendous thunderstorm and lightning storm. It was incredible. And I found refuge in a very large rock that was probably almost as big as this area right here. It had an overhang so I could sit underneath it. It's almost like my own little cave. I actually drew a picture of it right there. And I sat in there, and I was reading this, and this is what I wrote. I've come to see Guru Mayan with our bell. We got here last night. As I write this, I am beneath a large boulder. Rain, lightning, thunder. It's neat, my cave. It's late afternoon time for myself. Lightning, thunder at the same time. That's close. Fun. The Guru Gita was interesting. I had some observations which I need to ferret out. It seemed to be a ceremony celebrating the Guru, and everyone was following, praising Baba, Guru Mai, giving up their power to the Guru. As I read the interpretation, I observed my uncomfortable feeling. After further review of the later and reading from the beginning, it really is a celebration of the Guru within. But I wonder if that is how most participate. That's not judgment. What it is saying what this awakening is occurring for everybody. It's about knowing that the source of everything that you want or have is right here. It's already within you. Your Guru is a teacher. Jesus is a teacher. They're all teachers. They're all masters. And so are you inside. And that was, to me, the profound thing that I found as I got through that process. I'm going to kind of fast forward because I think we're going to run out a little bit of time for some of this. But I had images of, and I was a Lutheran. I didn't understand the Sacred Heart, because that was not part of the Lutheran piece of this. Never saw that. Never really got into it. But I had images of the Sacred Heart. In meditation, I had images of the Sacred Heart on a torch. It was incredible. I had, wafts of vanilla smell occur when I had experiences with the Christ energy. It was just incredible. Things that I just can't explain, and you can't scientifically, but you can from an experiential basis. And they are real. I had an aha moment regarding Jesus. I couldn't figure out why I was having such a difficult time after being trained and brought up with Jesus as, as part of my religion. Why I was having such a